Hey everybody, how's it going? Daniel Kaplan here. So in this video, I'm going to be diving into kind of the philosophy that I have always followed within the off-market lead generation space. And so for context, I personally own a little bit over 100 doors. I've done a couple hundred wholesale deals myself for my own personal company. I also run a lead generation company that has worked with hundreds of different clients. So it's safe to say I have a lot of data on what is working versus what is not working in terms of how we can go and get the best deals possible. And it's all about leverage points. And I would say the number one lever that we see that I have used throughout my whole entire journey in doing deals and scaling almost any single endeavor is just solely focusing on doing those inputs. And what we see is some people get hyper fixated on building the best systems or going to go and find the best list to go and cold call or doing this an excessive amount of training or interviewing to find the right prospects. But yes, that is important, but the number one thing is just to be doing so many inputs in so much volume with whichever avenue that you decide. So, for example, let's say we choose a couple of different avenues that we can do in terms of finding deals. We have cold calling, we have emailing, and we have texting. You will have two different sides of the curve. Maybe we'll call it three. The first one is the individuals who want to be hyper focused and really work on getting the best data possible. So, when they're doing their prospecting, they might have a list of 100 hand-picked individuals. And then the other end of the spectrum, where you have people like me, rather than only finding 100 properties, I'm going to go and pull 100,000. And there's no really right or wrong. I know guys who are doing the more niche kind of stuff that do very well for themselves. And then we have the people in the middle who try and do just enough to get by. Maybe they choose to go and pull 1,000 or 10,000 properties for them to go and prospect to. And that, I would say, that middle of the area is where I see people get lost the most. Because all that matters is doing so much volume where it is unreasonable for you to source a deal. And that is a philosophy that I have always followed. So if you are building a cold calling team, right, and you are making 5 or 10,000 phone calls a day, aka you're probably generating 3 to 5 leads in a single day, it is a statistical improbability for you to not get a deal. And that is how you need to be thinking when you are setting up your infrastructure. You need to be setting everything up and scaling and building the systems where it would be improbable for you to go and source a deal. And when you're looking at inputs and outputs and also just looking from like a physics standpoint, you also have the fulcrum, right? That is your leverage point. What are things that you can do that are high leverage that will allow you to go and do this large amount of inputs with not as much time or resources allocated? So an example of this would go and be having a power dialer, right? Rather than having to go and hand call one person at a time and maybe make 100 outbound calls in a 4-hour session, you get a power dialer where you can go and make 1,500 calls in a single 4-hour session. The other part of it is I know individuals who are doing low volume texting because they have a shitty provider that is probably charging them too much money and they cannot do enough volume. So on the other end of the spectrum, what you want to do is go and send 5 or 10,000 texts a day, right? This is not legal advice, but this is what we have seen that works. You want to be able to do so many inputs, but do it in a high leverage way. So I'll see people who think that they're doing inputs by going to go and drive for dollars or go and manually go and grab records from the county. At the end of the day, that is probably a waste of your time. And the highest leverage thing for you to always be focusing on is that initial input, that high volume. And that is why, for me in my personal business, why I have lived and died by cold calling. I have my callers that are making 10,000 calls in a single day across all of my team. On average, we might go and have, let's say, 800 conversations and convert 8 leads. In a single month, I'm going to probably generate 160 leads. If I cannot convert one or maybe two or even three of those leads three into a deal, I am doing something wrong and I have a bigger issue. I probably have a fucking skill issue. If I do so much volume and I'm not getting a deal, that is literally just a skill issue on my end. And that is why I always say that we need to focus on the inputs, where if I do enough of those inputs, I will get a deal. And again, this is why you want to build big cold calling teams, where you want to go and do massive outbound texting. Because if you get enough times at bat, you are going to get a hit. And so for all those people who are focusing on getting a super niche, super small list, maybe they care so much about the market that they're calling in or prospecting in, scratch all of that and solely just focus on the inputs, But as you focus on those inputs, think about how can I allocate X amount of time but get 10x the output. So hiring overseas cold callers, getting a lead manager who can handle all of our texts. So when we're doing excessive amounts of inputs, we need to also think of leverage. How can I go and offload some of this work to cold callers, to people who answer my texts, to a disposition rep, to a JV company that I'm working with? So do enough inputs, have the right leverage points, build the team and the systems around it, and I promise it's impossible to not get a fucking banger deal. And this is what I see across all these private equity shops that we work with. They're just simply not doing enough volume. They're good at their trade, they're well capitalized, they're good at actually the asset management side and buying these deals. They just don't have enough deals, and that is always their bottleneck. And the number one thing to solve that is to do enough volume where it is unreasonable for you to not get a deal. And that is what you need to be thinking of when you're building these systems, when you're doing these inputs. You need to have leverage and do an excessive amount of inputs for you to go and get your desired output. And I promise your competition will all be texting you, Daniel, John, Jake, how the fuck are you getting this many deals? And it's solely not going to be because you have the best list or you found a hidden marketing channel. It's that you just do so much fucking volume, and that is how you will crush it.